Darcy Benincosa joins In the Calm. Darcy is a world-renowned destination wedding photographer. She's an entrepreneur, a business mentor, and host of the Play Brave podcast. She lives the epitome of romantic, feminine, adventurous, dreamy life. It's like walking into this perfectly curated magazine or romantic movie when you step into her world. But life was not always romantic and successful for Darcy. She told me that when she stopped resisting, her whole life fell into flow. She's going to share with us exactly what that flow looked like in her story of going from a school teacher to a world-traveling professional photographer and now building a wildly successful coaching business, helping others make their own life leaps. We dive into what it's like to find your own life leaps, learning to romanticize your life, and Darcy's favorite self-love tools. Buckle up for romance, laughter, and a deeply heart-connected conversation in this episode. Let's dive in. Welcome to In the Calm. I'm your host, Georgiana Alexander. Welcome, my beautiful friend, Darcy. So good to have you on the show.
Oh my gosh, Georgie, I can't believe we're finally doing this. I'm so excited. I've been waiting forever. Anything called calm and chaos, I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like we get to dive right into the messy, the calm, and I feel like that just suits your world and your story and your life so much. When we met through a mutual friend, Mary, shout out to Mary.
Hey, Mary.
It was just such a moment of, I felt like you radiate creativity and light and femininity. And then the more that you shared, and the more I got to learn about your story of intuitive business and really the connected pieces in your life and how you've just, from the outside, obviously it looks like you're just floating through. And I know that's never the case, right? It doesn't feel like that when we're going through it, but it's just such an inspiration. And your work and your life is so beautiful to see the way that you curate all of the pieces. I can't wait for everyone to get to hear your story and dive into the world that you've created.
Oh, thank you so much. I loved meeting you that day. And that day is a really good representation of sort of entrepreneur life. I had a ticket for the next day. I was supposed to come into Nashville the day after that. And then my friend said, Mary's having this group of incredible people together. You should come. And I thought, you know what? Yes, I'm changing my ticket. Because anytime I can get in a room with actual people who are magical and mystical and big picture thinkers and just collaborate, we just don't get enough opportunities this day and age in person. And that was such a beautiful afternoon. And you and I had such a great connection. So it's fun to keep that going.
Absolutely. I know the more I've gotten to know you, even beyond that day, and know you through your posts and your stories, my heart is just like, oh my God, Darcy, love you so much. Just the different moments you've experienced. So I'm not going to keep everybody waiting. Let's dive right in. Let's dive into, first of all, I'd love for you to share a little bit of your evolution story. You are a destination wedding photographer, but you're also an educator. You've been featured in Harper's Bazaar and many outlets like Sports Illustrated and ABC News. I mean, all of these names that everyone would recognize. Your work is stunning. And you started as a school teacher.
I know.
You found dissatisfaction in that life and you're like, something is calling me. I mean, take us through that.
Well, here's how I had to evolve out of being a school teacher. I was, at first being a school teacher really served me. I got a degree in English and French. I moved to Paris when I was 20. I taught English. I bummed around Europe for almost a decade, like without a cell phone. I'm 45 years old. I did not have all these ideas of now you have to capture every single trip, what you're eating, what does your outfit look like? Does it look good? Is the sun perfect? Is the cocktail shiny? Like all the little moments that we see in reels. I didn't have any of that. I just did the very authentic bumming around, being in hostels, meeting strangers, I was Mormon at the time, so I'd be in a bar in Dublin and, everybody's drinking, have my little ginger ale and just having the best time ever. And so it's so funny because one of my students gosh, this is back in like 2007 or 2005, something crazy. One of my students gave me a bootlegged copy of the movie The Secret. She's like, Miss,
Yeah.
I really,
Okay.
I saw this and I really think you would like this. And I watched it and I was like, huh. And that was kind of the first place where thoughts become things. You can manifest your life. That's when that language first started, was with that movie, like on a bigger scale. So then I started to move into abundance work. What does it mean to be abundance? I had grown up really poor. My parents were still quite poor. I was kind of locked in at $50,000 a year being a school teacher. And as I started doing that work, reading the books, meditating, understanding that I am a co-creator in my life, that I can raise my salary, I thought, well, how can I, no matter how much positive thinking I do, I can't raise the salary of a school teacher. It's a government job. You get incremental, sad, poor, very tragic raises every year. That's like $1,000 more. And there came a point where I had this aha moment where it was like, to become wealthy, Darcy, you are going to have to leave this job. You are right.
Yeah.
You will not be able to become wealthy in this job. There is no pathway for that, even though you are a born teacher. And I am a born teacher, and teaching is just one of my archetypes. I love teaching. I love education. But then I went on a path to discover how to get paid really well for my education. And you get paid really well when you get people really good results and they have big life shifts and life changes. And so I just started working with adults instead of kids. But I took a 10-year break to be a photographer. And I'm still a photographer now. Most of the people I educate and teach are creative people who are branching out and realizing photography is a beautiful career. I probably won't be able to shoot these 1,000 people weddings when I'm 75. My hips are hurting already. Like, wedding photography is really hard on your body. So I just, have really listened to my intuition and how to grow and be the best version of myself creatively and business wise, and be financially free and all of those beautiful things. And they do come so much with, of course, your thoughts, which is not revolutionary this day and age, but I think people can still miss the place where they're having the limiting beliefs. And it really is telling a new story around those limiting beliefs that changes your life.
Oh, I love this story so much. There's so many key components that I want to go back into, but I love the way that you really leaned into your intuition. And that, as you said, you discovered this language that was new to you. And even though it is terms now that we're more familiar with, what I find is there's almost a noise factor to what's being talked about. And at the end of the day, people are still feeling displaced and lost on the hows of how to put that in motion, how to really interpret it, that there's so much information about what to take in, and this means that, and look at this, and oh, over here, that it's not distilled into trusting yourself that your path is going to be your path. And I love how you really designed your own path, right? Like, your path does not fit into the box of the normal career transition or the normal thought process. And it's deeply personal, and it's been successful because it's so deeply personal. But the fact that you could then translate that to others by saying, these are the actual action steps that I took to evaluate where I needed to shift my thinking, where I needed to expand the way I was looking at my life from what you wanted to where you wanted to be, right? It's so powerful. Did you just feel like you already had that innately in you? Where there's some mindset workaround you had to go through? Like, talk about the challenges here a little bit with us.
Yeah, it's so funny because I run my own podcast, and my podcast is called Play It Brave. And it comes from this journal entry where I was just writing about what kind of life I wanted to live. And I wrote this phrase that said, I'd rather play it brave than play it safe. And I was like, ooh, play
Yes.
it brave. I love that. And, there are a couple of philosophies that I have in life. One is never take advice from somebody you don't want to become.
Oh my gosh. Can we just say that just a little louder, a little bit more like, hello?
Yeah, don't take advice from somebody you don't want to become. The thing is, a lot of people gave me feedback when I was quitting my job, my parents especially. I love my parents. They're sweet little Mormon people who have lived Groundhog's Day for their entire life. They wake up, they eat the same food, they do the same thing. They won't go on a vacation unless I like force it upon them. They don't want to do anything new. They like to read their same books. Like they just love that. And so when they're like, I'm really scared that you're leaving your job, because when you leave a job that has healthcare and 401k and a monthly paycheck that you can depend upon, entrepreneurship is a big risk. It is unstable pay. You have to I didn't do healthcare for a long time. You have to pay a lot more for it. You have to, there's a lot of different risks that come along with that. What's funny is anybody who was like, don't do this, I didn't want their life. And anybody who was like, you got this, do it. Even if it was just people online that I was watching their videos of their success. I would YouTube a lot during my lunch breaks of people who had done a non-traditional path. And they were like, it's going to be really hard. You're going to be uncomfortable. But if you listen to yourself, if you trust your intuition, if you follow your heart, if you follow your dreams, if you follow your bliss, all of this stuff, it's going to work out. So I really took that to heart. The other thing that I did that really helped me leave something that I was scared to leave, and I do this all the time if I'm scared, what's the worst that could happen?
Yes, yes.
So I sat and I said, okay, if I leave my school teaching job and I fail and I just have no money left, what is the worst that could happen? Well, I am a white woman living in America. And my parents have a really nice home, and they have a guest bedroom. And what the worst that would happen is I would move back in with my parents. My mom would make me oatmeal every morning while I decided what else to do. And I would either go back to being a school teacher, because they always need good school teachers, or I would do something else. But the failure I was facing at the time, I could lose my house. I had one house at that time. Now I have three. I could lose that house. I could, all those things I was willing to lose. I was like, I could lose my house. Like if it's up to me staying in a job that I don't like, that is safe, that is getting worse and worse as the day goes by. I mean, what we've done to teachers over the last 15 years is insane, ridiculous, horrible. And no self-respecting person can do it for that long if they're in a really bad system. So yeah, don't take advice from anybody you don't want to become. And what's the worst that could happen? Those two questions, they helped me, and they still help me to this day, take the bigger risks.
I love that so much, because there is, again, so much noise from places and people that they sound like they have the answers, right? They sound like they've gone the journey. And sometimes when we get into the subtleties and when we really start designing our lives, I feel like that there are people and circumstances that you think you want to create your life like, right? You want to emulate. And then as you go more into your own journey, you really start to go deep within yourself, ask yourself what works for you. It starts breaking away those pieces of the ideal, right? The ideal version that we think we want. These people that have XYZ. We want the house that looks like that, the lifestyle, the vacation that looks like theirs. It's really interesting. I've been on this journey for myself, and I'm a big explorer. So I love trying out different lifestyles. Like, oh, I'm going to go down this path. Oh, I'm going to go down this path. And so it's interesting that you really leaned into don't follow anyone's advice, that you don't want their lifestyle. And sometimes in the beginning of entrepreneurship, you don't necessarily know what you do want, but you can more quickly assimilate what you don't want. So extracting those pieces, and you've built this beautiful romantic brand. Your work is very romantic as a photographer. Your words are powerful, but you carry a femininity with you. Do you feel like that was there? Was that always a part of the Darcy aesthetic and lifestyle, or how did you unfold that? Because as we're talking about unfolding the pieces of what that life looked like, we're not following people that we don't love, but then also there's still a lot of information out there. So getting honed in.
I'm laughing because it came from being a 30-year-old Mormon virgin. When you wait till you're 30 to lose your virginity after leaving a religion that told you never, never do anything unless you're married. So when I was younger, I just read all these romance novels, right? Because I couldn't get any satisfaction anywhere. And I had all these hormones, and, the religion told you to just push those down and don't even think about it. And really just be a nun is what they're telling you to do. Be a nun until you get married, and then, do your thing. Well, I was just not getting married. And so it
Mm-hmm.
started to become this big conflict. And I would read romance novels. And so what I did, instead of getting into, sex and figuring my sexuality out, I started to figure out my sensuality, everything that I could that wasn't breaking a rule, which means laying in the grass in an English countryside, a field of daisies, and wearing this beautiful silk dress, because I was playing with my sensuality, because my sexuality was totally blocked by this set of rules that I let be in my life, until the day I woke up and was like, what the hell have I been doing? No, went on a sexual walkabout for a year, and that
Yeah, I
was,
was gonna say a lot of catch up there. You had a lot of
yeah,
catch up time.
I've done a good job catching up. But I think, my grandmother is a painter. And so she'd paint these beautiful florals and paint these idyllic scenes. And I started painting too. And I got really into Shakespeare and sonnets and poetry and baking and, just have always been an experience-based person. I want an experience more than I would want a new car, like give me, like, I have had the same car since 2011, Subaru Outback. I don't drive very much, so it's great. Like, that's not what I value. Send me to the cliffs of Moher in Ireland and let the wind blow on my face and I'll write a bit of poetry. Even just this morning, as I was on a walk, I was singing the "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning" from the musical Oklahoma, and it has the most beautiful lyrics. It's like, the trees are busy blowing the breeze in every, or the wind is busy blowing the breeze in every tree. I am a lover of words first. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And so when I started doing photography, I did romanticize it. I learned photography mostly in Paris. I was very alone there. I had my camera, and every day I would walk around the city until I got to meet friends. But when you move to a new place, there's going to be 3 to 4 months where you just have a little bit of a lonely time, because
Right.
you're trying to build the friendship. So I would wander and try and recreate these like moments that I'd see in these old black and white photos of Paris. I would always tell myself, like, it looks normal now, but in 50 years, when people look at this photo, it's going to look old and of a time gone by. So even as I was capturing the present moment, I was always thinking about the present moment nostalgically, like, oh, in 30 years. And it's true. I have some photos. I moved to Paris in 1997. So I don't know the math there, but it's been a while. And looking back at those old photos, this fashion is different than today. Nobody had cell phones. Now if I go to
Yeah.
a picture of cafes in Paris, everybody's on a cell phone, and it makes me sad. I'm like, oh, not as bad as in America, but all these pictures of people just talking, the art of language, the art of conversation. So yeah, I've always been a romantic. I even told my parents when I was younger, my dad said, you need to learn Spanish. That's what you'll use, because in Utah, we have a lot of Spanish speaking communities. And I said, yeah, but Dad, I'm going to live in Paris. I was like 12. He's like, nobody in our family goes to Paris. I'm like, I'm going to live in Paris, so I'm going to learn French. I just knew it. I just always knew that would be one of my cities. And Paris really is like the most romantic city in the world. It's so beautiful, and it's cliche for a reason. So yeah, sometimes repression leads to other things developing. And I do think the repression of my sexuality led to this beautiful development of taking in the world orgasmically in any other way I could, right?
Yeah. That's actually such a beautiful point. I want to go back for a second and just wax poetic on everywhere in Europe and everywhere in travel in that time period of the 90s, like pre-cell phone, because I was traveling and living abroad at times during that time as well. Oh my gosh, like the air was different,
Mhm.
and you would just walk and get lost and not know where you were. And there's something magical about that sensation. Yeah, you have to figure out a map, or you just wander and like take this path and then find your way. And then you meet a group of people, or, you wander into a shop and have a long conversation with somebody. There's so many happenstances and synchronicities that pull you together. And I think that they very much happen in our modern lives as well. But when we get distracted, going back to that point is so beautiful, that when you can breathe in the air a little bit differently and feel your own romance with yourself or explore it in different ways, it really does color your life so differently and starts leading to experiences that are pure magic. Like there's no way you could just create by planning it. But oh, I miss those days sometimes. We can just be nostalgic. We'll
I
recreate them in
know.
modern life.
Good old days. Everybody talks about the good old days. It reminds me of the show, the movie Midnight in Paris.
Yeah, exactly.
No, now Cezanne or Dali, that was the time. No, go back even further. This was the time. No, but time. I love that movie for just that reason, because I will idolize the past a lot and I do love it. But I do think the most powerful place you can be is in the present moment. And presence is the thing. The cell phone is a way of really just being a robot, being a pawn, giving into all the distractions that mean nothing to your actual life. And I think we do have to have mastery and discipline over how we utilize technology in our lives, for sure.
I agree. I think that's why like carving out time period where you can turn your phone off, or just as you said, taking the walk and singing a song or letting the wind blow against your face, like having these moments and experiences where you have new ritual in your life. I think those are the moments that start to seed joy and inspiration in your life, and then they lead you down different pathways.
One of my favorite afternoons is I microdosed some mushrooms and held hands with my tree. For like an hour. Like I was sitting on my front porch and my tree had this branch coming. It was this little pine tree. And I'm like, hi. I'm like, I will hold your hand. And I sat there and held hands with my tree. And I just had I was just so present. And oh
Oh my
man.
God. I love that. I was actually Christine, who's another friend of ours that we met in that day, like when we connected, she and I were out at a walk and I was explaining the energy dynamics of a tree to her. It was in the distance, it was at a field. But so I was not microdosing, but that's kind of my normal viewpoint. Everybody on the show knows anyway, my mindset. I'm like, oh, this is normal. But might as well have been microdosing. But so this tree, we were talking about it and I was like saying, okay, look at this tree. And the whole tree just like lit up, like its energy field just got like, oh, my turn, it's me. It's my spotlight, you know? And we just had this moment with this tree, and it's just something so beautiful. We think that our world is separated from us. We think that from where, say, I was standing across that field to the other side of the tree line, that there's distance and space, but there's not. There's energetic connection, and there's intentional connect, and there's, our thoughts, and there's not the space between us. There's not the space between what we're wanting and where we're going. It is really energetically connected. And for people that it's like, oh, well, that's still like air. If you just imagine it like jello, it's like this lush richness in our life that is so deeply connected to us. And we get
Have
to
you ever,
experience it.
not to sidetrack this whole thing to
No.
trees, but have you ever read the book, The Secret Language of Trees?
Mm-mm.
Oh, oh, it's just such a beautiful read. It just talks about how trees are always in communication, how they communicate. And you cannot look at nature the same way. There's so many things we don't know about the magic of nature that we just take for granted, because it's just always been that way. But yeah, my trees in my front yard, I have 3 of them. They all have names. I hug them all the time. Like the guardians, because I live in a really interesting, energetic neighborhood where pretty much I would say 99.7% of the homes are all owned by old men and families in very old traditional relationships. So most of the property, when you look it up, has men, and I'm one of the first women to buy a home alone in this neighborhood. It's a very old, rich neighborhood in Utah. And my front window kind of faces this energetic convergence of 2 streets. And I have 3 trees that just deflect the energy every time so that my house is really, really protected from any kind of just old patriarchal energy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in my neighborhood. Like I've had neighbors ask me like, how are you able to afford this house? And I know it's just because I'm a single
Oh,
woman. And they do it out of like niceness, but I've also done a lot of improvements to the house. They're like, who is this woman? What does she do? How is she affording this? It's just something a lot of them haven't ever seen in their lifetime. I do feel like I moved into the neighborhood to just be a different point of energy for
I
it
was
too.
going to say, you're just you're just busting shit up in there. You're like literally just like, I'm here, we're changing
Women
this
owning
show.
property is huge. We need much more of it in America than we have.
Mhm.
That's why I love buying homes and utilizing them for my own wealth. And, I'm not a big believer that I can own land. Like I can't own the earth, but in our constructs of today, yeah, they're selling it. So it's like, well, then I'm going to be the one, because so much of what is going on that is destroying our planet is because of who owns what land and what decisions they're making. And most people make decisions based on how much money they can make, not on how they can protect and defend. That's why I love it when really good people buy up really big plots of land. Like here in Utah, Robert Redford, the actor,
Yeah.
started Sundance Film Festival, but he bought, I can't remember if it's hundreds of thousands, but he's bought so much of the beautiful land in Utah with the promise to never sell it. Because if he didn't own it, it would all be commercialized. It would all be turned into Park City. Park City has become this place that's like, like Aspen, like it's like if you watch the series Yellowstone, right? Like how that family's just defending the land and everybody's coming in because they can make millions of dollars. And that's one reason I really love that series. I was late to the game watching it, but I'm like, this is the predicament that we are facing as humans, is what will we sell our soul for?
Mhm.
And so many people are ready to sell their soul for millions of dollars. Even entrepreneurs, even like in the realm that I've been in, I have been surprised at how many things are fake and not real, and selling a story and manipulation. And you gotta, man, integrity is my highest value. So it's been really interesting to go into some of these bigger rooms and see where integrity is pushed aside for fame. For those two things, fame and fortune, man, they'll get your ego every single time. So
Mhm. When we go into these spaces that we admire from afar and that we think we want to be a part of, and we don't realize how contrasted we are already because we're heart led, because we know that there is a better way. And I think that's why, you know, you're in the places that you're in, to buy the land, to show up in your femininity, to show up in your intuitive led business and helping others feel safe for that space as well. I think there's such deep power in this because our femininity, for men and women, any, that feminine nature, and regardless of what gender you associate with, it's powerful because it's our intuitive, it's our flow, it's our creative. And for so much of our business structure in this country and in every other society, that has been completely shut down. You were just telling me this story about how in Greece, you were just back from Greece and you were visiting monasteries, and how traditionally in the monasteries, women couldn't sing. The nuns couldn't sing because,
learn to read, they couldn't learn to write, and they couldn't sing.
yeah, yeah. And that's ingrained in our lineages, in our bodies, that information is being held. And so that's why it's so important, as your podcast says, to be brave, to come out of that, to find the thing that really lights you up and inspires you and leads you into the path of your calling. More and more of us are being called to show up in the world in a different way, to create a new system, to break down, like in your neighborhood, to break down the nothing against men, but we just don't want to carry this patriarchal structuring anymore. There's a different way, and it's been the way the whole time. It's just been segmented and shut down.
Yeah, I mean, women are as equal participants as men in patriarchy. And
Mm.
for all that we want to sometimes blame men, I will tell you, growing up in the religion I grew up, and, men held, quote unquote, the priesthood. And I would say, well, what's the priesthood? Oh, it's the power of God. I'm like, that sounds pretty amazing. I would like that, and women would be like, no, 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 no. No, no, no. Women don't need that. No, we don't need that. That's not for us.
You're just a birth portal that like opens the universe and creates life, but that's not for you.
Yeah, it's just interesting, the stories that we buy into and believe, and what our soul is really calling us for. And I'm really careful not to villainize anybody, but also to look at things really realistically, and then understand that the main thing that I can have any power over is me. right? And me just showing up as me showing up in this neighborhood as the badass single lady who's buying houses and, working from her home and doesn't have to go to an office and saves money. And so like that will create shifts, that will create different thoughts to be thought, and thank goodness for all the women who came before me who showed me that was possible too, because I do think you can't become what you can't see. We still haven't created. It's funny because I study archetypes a lot, and we kind of need archetypes to understand the world. And what's funny is you think of like the wounded child archetype, where all of us have now invested into healing our trauma in our past, didn't really happen until we saw its opposite, which is the magical divine child, which really happened when Disneyland came into being. When Walt Disney came in and started creating these cartoons, once you start creating this, the shadow appears. The shadow is the wounded child. And then all this like psychology around healing trauma, your inner child, that wasn't even in conversation before Walt Disney. Like you look at it, it's interesting. So I really believe we don't quite yet have the full version of a really, truly empowered, divine feminine woman yet. I think as soon as we do, she will be president. I think we're making big strides, but I think we're still not quite sure what she fully looks like because it's so new. Like it's so new that I can own land. Like my mom back in the day when they were married, she couldn't, like, I don't think she could have her own checking account, like there's just weird things that happened for me one generation ago. So we're still in this power of creating the fully, and I'm not saying that none of us are fully formed women. I hope it's not taken that way, but there is an evolution for us still that is coming that I'm very excited to be part of. And every glass ceiling we break through, and the thing is, the main barrier for women are her own thoughts, especially about her beauty, her value, her worth, her importance, and how easily she talks herself out of all of those on a daily basis.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. Especially the way that we speak to ourselves. I was in this practice recently where I was noticing the difference of the way, say, you pick up a baby and you love that baby, and there's none of the conditioning, like you pick up a child and you just like squeeze it up. Or for me, my cat, or any other animal, like I'm like, I love you. I love you. I had a conversation with a turkey yesterday. Actually, I got gobbled at. I rolled down my window like, hey, what's up? And he like gobbled me away. Like, I'm busy here. Excuse me.
I love that.
Yeah, but the way that we interact with and the people that we love or the associations that we love, we don't often give that love to ourselves. It's so empowering when you can realize the healing and the depth of that relationship, of not just loving your appearance or loving your beauty, but really allowing yourself to receive your own love the way that you give it to others. I think is really transformative. For you, I know that's something that you've actually talked about. You've overcome different trauma and pretty shocking experiences in your life and surrounding your life into a place where you are an empowered feminine. I mean, you even talked about, that your sexuality was completely locked down. So you had to find another outlet through your sensuality. But so what was that healing journey for you like in uncovering these traumas and in healing to be able to fully step into your empowerment as the feminine that you are now?
I think looking back, I tried healing on so many different methods, and I didn't quite get what healing really meant until I started to just spend time with me and get out of all the things that I was being told in the world. So here's one. I'm a curvy girl. I'm 6 feet tall. I'm like a size 18, like I'm curvy. There was not this body positivity, body acceptance, plus size models at all when I was growing up. So the main story I was told in every facet of media, television, I still have yet to see a true romantic movie with a woman who is not in a perfect body. Like there's very few of those, right? Perfect women deserve love. If you have a perfect body, you're the only one who can go to the beach. Like I was raised in a world that really contradicted who I was. And everything was telling me you are not worthwhile because you struggle with these things. That just created a cycle of eating, or not eating. Like in high school, I went very anorexic because I thought, well, I'll lose all this weight, which I did. And then I started to become attractive to a lot of men, and I started to get hit on. And I realized, oh, that is actually not safe for me, because I was keeping the weight on as a big protection because I was sexually abused as a kid by a cousin. And so thank goodness I have given myself lately the idea that healing is a beautiful journey. You'll always be on it. You will get healthier and healthier. It is part of our human process, because I used to carry around this idea that I would just get healed and then I'd be fine.
Mm.
And I remember getting really frustrated a couple of years ago I was doing a plant medicine journey, and I thought, this is it. This is going to take away all my trauma. And I came out of there and I was like, nope, it's still there. Like some of it is still there. And I was like, okay, so what I now know is I get to be present with myself. I have rules around being a healthy adult now that I actually stick to. I have to be present in my body. If I'm not present in my body, if I'm disassociated, something has happened, and I will get help with that. My help usually comes in the form of, I have an amazing therapist who has developed an amazing system of therapy that has helped me. I used to go through different therapies, and talk therapy just felt like I was complaining and I hated it. And I've tried it like 3 times in my life, and every time it was horrible. But this type of therapy has led to truly, truly being able to see why parts of myself are acting out, what that part is, what that part needs, how to give it what it needs, how to meet my own needs within myself, not outside of myself. But I will say, and it's just you asked such a big question. I don't know how to
Sorry.
it. It's just such a big, how do you heal from trauma? Let's see, how much time do we have? I will say I have. So here's one of my rules. As I've learned more about archetypes, and we all know about we have 4 that are pretty destructive: the victim, the saboteur, the child, and the prostitute. And those 4 are in every human, and you'll see them. Now, I have a sticky note on my fridge, because eating is my thing that I will turn to, that says only adults welcome here. Meaning if I'm going to the fridge triggered or stressed, or with the phrase, I have 2 things that I know is my child archetype trying to sabotage me. One is, you had a really hard day, you deserve a cookie. That's a kid behavior. And sometimes I do eat the cookie, but most of the time I'm like, oh, honey, the cookie won't be very good for you because I have high blood sugar. So I'm not good at cookies. But I'm like, but what if we take a bath? Or what if we take a walk? Or what if we get some rose oil, and I'll do something really beautiful for myself. And then my little mechanism I learned from a hypnotherapist is, and then I'll take a cinnamon covered toothpick and put that in my mouth, and it satisfies my need to like binge eat or whatever. The other question is,
that's good. That's a good tip. Yeah.
Right? That's everybody. It helps so much. The other is, I'll start tomorrow. That is my saboteur. That is all of our saboteur. Every time we know we should be doing something that's good for us, I will go to the gym. I will lift weights. I will wake up early. I will move my body. It's usually about moving our bodies, eating, making a connection, doing something in our business that scares us. I'll do it tomorrow is our saboteur. So what's really helped me with trauma is to recognize what parts of me are speaking, and then having the wherewithal. Now, sometimes they win. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm going to start tomorrow. But there's a part of me that's like, and Darcy, your saboteur is winning right now. And I'm like, yes, I do. Like, you're having a conversation in your head. 20 different people at all times. I think, there's always the part of you that is so motivated and wants to do this. And then there's part of you that's like afraid and holds back. And then there's the part of you, the more we can get those parts to all become one and get on the same team, I think trauma fragments you. And I think healing brings you back to the oneness. And so time alone, time in nature, time really questioning, is this true? When I really started questioning, is it true that you have to be a size 0 to find love? And when I decided no, I started, like, my dating life that was so dry flourished. And I realized, hey, there's a
Mm.
lot of men who like some curves. You know,
Mhm.
there are all different kinds of men. And, anybody believing in this, like bodies are different. I think you write the stories of your life, and it's really important to make sure you're writing one that serves you. You're not just reenacting the ones that are being spoon fed you by the media. It's a
Mhm.
big one.
I think that's huge.
That's
Yeah.
trauma. I don't know how to sum it up, but that's
No,
what I'll say.
there's so much in it. It's like I wondered from your stories because we all carry so many different types of trauma, right? I come from a very deep trauma story, early childhood and different phases in life and things like that. And we all have to find the different ways that work for us to not just cope, but to find that healing. I loved what you said about the fragmentation, the trauma fragments us, and the healing really brings us back to ourselves. When we're going through trauma, we try to dissociate from those pieces because we look at them as those are the ugly pieces. Those are the pieces no one would want. But really, if we can shift our perspective to, as it sounds you have done on this journey, of how can these serve me? How can they heal me? How can they help me as a gift of finding the places where I'm fragmented, of where I feel broken, where it's telling me stories through conditioning, through societal conditioning, family conditioning that aren't truthful, right? And we start breaking down that and looking at what is true, what's true for you, not the world outside of you. That's where your empowerment comes in. And again, it goes back to what you've said before of listening within, turning inward and getting really okay with you because you came in this time and place to show up for the storyline that you are living. You're embodying that. And in doing so on this journey of healing, you've been able to really fully and bravely step into your business, into your empowerment.
Yeah. And I want to say, when I say like spend time with yourself, it means actually listening to your body. So I lost 65 pounds with, people will not believe this, without doing any other exercise or eating any differently.
Mhm.
What I say, the first 40 pounds, I just felt my anger that I had felt, that I had bottled up for years. There was a lot of anger I had that I had allowed religion to be in control of my sexuality for 30 years of my life. I felt
Yeah.
very behind. There was a lot of anger I had for my parents, just not really like, one, I had a lot of anger that they didn't protect me when I was little, even though, like, how could they have known? But at the same time, they let a troubled 16-year-old cousin move in with us, and then they let him babysit me, right? I had
Mhm.
so much anger, especially at my dad for being like, because my dad didn't want him there, but he never stood up to my mom to say, no, I don't want this kid living in our house. And my mom is like, let's take in every wounded dog, just because she wants to help, right? It's not that I can blame my parents for this, but I still have to acknowledge I had a lot of anger. And I
Mhm.
didn't even know how to safely express my anger, because when you're grown up as a woman in this world, being angry means you're a bitch. Being angry means you're difficult. Being angry means all of these things that you don't want to be as a woman. Generally, now we're in like this boss bitch culture, where everybody's like, yes, I'm a bitch, and everybody's claiming their bitchiness, and it's great. I personally don't want to be a bitch. Like, I love being a kind, beautiful, loving, firm person with boundaries and standards. Whatever, I guess it depends on your definition of bitch, but I didn't know how to be angry. And when I started learning, I learned a couple of things of how to be angry. And then I worked the anger out. A lot of the anger was in my hips, and I would do these hip stretches, and I would end up crying like angry tears just from stretching, because our body, and this is something we're all coming to know now too, our body keeps the score, right? That's the book. Like, your body is holding on to everything. And I knew there was a reason why I had all this weight. And I knew it wasn't all related to just the fact that I was eating, because I didn't always eat more than other people. I just was holding on to it as a protection. And once you get your mind right, your body follows. So I look back at old pictures of myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can just see it all in my face. And
Mhm.
I had a much more double chin than I have now. And just being in tune with emotions and listening to your body, the release can happen faster than you know, and the change can happen
Yes.
faster than you realize, but it is not fun. It is uncomfortable. It was very hard for me to feel all of that anger. I had to admit a lot of things I was angry about that I had not admitted before. I had to learn how to process the anger that came up out of me, which was not pleasant. The first 40 pounds were just me feeling anger. People are like, what's your weight loss plan? I'm like, getting angry. Oh, okay. That's why I'm going to write a book. Get angry. How to release 40 pounds.
You need to write this book. You do. There's such an association to our emotions and the way that we hold things physically in the energetic state. So, right. So, all of this was trapped in your emotions and in your energetic state, and then it physically expresses. And for you, that was the safety. And for you, that was the way to dissociate. You know, I'm the same way emotionally. It doesn't matter what I physically eat. Like, I have a lot of food sensitivities and allergies, and my weight used to hugely fluctuate by 10 pounds, even in this course of a day from
Mm,
the energetic shifting of things, right? And so I would eat something and think, oh, it's related. But then I realized it wasn't related. It was the energetics of being in toxic environment or of not following my life path, of not honoring the emotions that were coming up. And that's huge. That's so powerful that you could see that so visibly, right? And it took the work because you had to go against every construct of anger's the bitch, anger's the bad person, like all of these voices trying to shut down this emotion and this anger. And that's the thing as women. I can't remember your human design. I feel like we've talked about this, haven't we?
I don't know if we talked much about it. I don't know.
Briefly.
I've done the gene keys and I've been really loving that. I'm a manifesting generator. What are you?
Okay. I'm a projector.
Oh, interesting. I have some
Yeah.
good projectors.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
I have
very sensitive
friends.
though. It's
We're so sensitive. Oh my goodness. So sensitive.
yeah.
And we're also, so we're not energy beings, but I
Mm,
lead with my emotions. Like that's my authority is emotional, right? But
mm,
so growing up in environments just as you, where emotions and having strong emotions, I'm also a double fire with a lot of triple fire in Vedic astrology, double fire in Eastern. And all my house planets are mostly in the house of Leo. So let's just say I'm not like angry, but I am intense. I have a lot of passion.
mhm.
And that's not really acceptable, you know, unless it comes in certain forms, especially in environments of depending on where you live, the culture, the background that you come from. You have to show up to be likable in certain forms, in certain ways. And when you're not in those forms and in those structures, the world turns ugly against you, right? That's the story that we've been told. That's the feedback we've gotten. That's the expression we've lived in our lives. So then going into your emotions to embody yourself, and that is the feminine path. That's the way of healing. That's the way of finding your power. That's tuning into your creativity, to your intuition. It's like you have to have these emotions and let them flow freely in order to really embrace that empowerment.
Yeah.
And with anger, anger is such a positive emotion. We don't think of it like that, right? But it's healing. It like flushes out what doesn't belong. It's a very clear signal of where things are misaligned. As a manny gen, like that's your signal. Like something's fucked up. Something's not right here, right?
Your boundaries are being crossed when
Yeah.
you're like, somehow my boundaries, I've crossed them or somebody else has crossed them. That's why childhood trauma is so hard, because as a kid, you don't know
You don't
about,
know.
parents are kind of in charge of those. And I think a lot of us, I don't think anybody escapes untraumatized. I
Yeah.
think it is actually part of the human experience to, as I had a friend say, that everybody at some point gets separated from their soul and their life is meant to merge those back together again.
Mm. Mhm.
If you are abused, you do kind of disassociate from your body. That is a separation of your soul. That is a separation of your boundaries. But it could be other things too. It can be very simple things that end up having a big effect on us. And I do think it's very powerful to do the work to acknowledge, see those, so that you can be fully, fully, fully embodied.
Yeah, and the archetype systems, Carolyn Miss, that you're referring to, right? I
Yeah.
love I love her cards, her archetype cards. Those are so beautiful. But everybody's like, "Oh, well, what are you talking about?" It's Carolyn Miss
Yeah,
archetypes.
so there's two. So Caroline Mace does like the major archetypes, and she says everybody has those four. And
Hmm.
then Carl Jung says he limits it
Hmm.
to four archetypes, which I really play with a lot in my own coaching program. I help women step into their 4 archetypes. It's queen, warrior, magician, and lover. And all 4 of those have shadow sides. So like the shadow of the warrior, which is being a martyr or being possessive. So when a woman gets really possessive or she martyrs herself, like a lot of moms do that, right? Like, oh, I'll just give this up. I'll sacrifice this for the family. That's not healthy. So Carl Jung is really great. I love how Caroline Mace adds in those 4 kind of destructive archetypes, because I think it just gives a name to our behaviors. And for me, when I can name it, it's like I can identify it and then I can make more rational decisions about it. Like, oh, this is definitely my saboteur, or this is my victim mode. Like anytime I want to blame somebody or gossip about somebody or complain about something, I'm like, okay, I am major in a victim here. And I don't like being in victim. I love being in my choice and in my power. And so recognizing when the signs that you're doing something that's a victim mentality will help you, because those 4 things pull you out of your power. And I think our main goal in life is to be in our power.
Yeah, absolutely. I was like taking it in and then I had a thought and I'm like,
well, I don't know where we really go from there.
I'm like, mic drop. my brain down.
Darcy is on her high horse.
I love it.
On my soapbox. Here's how you get empowered. I do love it though. It's been very helpful for me.
I think these tools that help us find the ways to connect, and a lot of people don't necessarily like to name these things, but again, for you, I mean, these are the pieces. I want to circle back to how you've transitioned in your career and how you've shown up. You've been able to embody a completely different financial life, business life, creative life, visual life. Your life looks incredibly different than it would otherwise, right? As we talked about at the beginning of the show. So for you, what were some of those tools that you learned business-wise along the way for really creating an intuitive, heart-led business?
The first one is that you will always be led to expansion, and there is always a solution to what you perceive as problems. And most people get stuck in the problem and see, like, one example I give is with photographers. They always say things, I've heard it a million times. I live in a saturated market, right? Because everybody's a photographer these days, because photos and video are in such a different place. And now AI is coming in. So now they're going to be like, I live in a saturated online, like people can get AI to do this stuff. So that's the problem, right? Like I find dwelling in the problems just leads to more problems and leads to you feeling very disempowered. So for me, I always say, like, it's not saturated with greatness. Like it's not saturated with masterpieces. It's saturated with mediocrity. So the first thing that you need to do is become better at what you're doing. Right. So I think there's a lot of entitlement in every profession at this time, especially with everybody watching online at people becoming millionaires on a daily basis. And like America has produced many, many, many millionaires. It's not that hard to become a millionaire anymore. But when you feel entitled to it, or you feel it needs to happen overnight, or there's like a sense of immediate gratification, this should be happening to me right now. Why is this taking so long? Why is it, it took me a long time to build $1 million, a 7-figure business. But that's mostly because I was out living life too. And money wasn't my ultimate aim always. I knew that I was expanding. And as long as I increased my income every year and I knew a plan for growth, I didn't mind it taking a while. I had to learn things along the way. So I think the ways that I've grown my business are to not dwell on the problems, to work on the right questions to ask, to stay very true to, my own expansion. I do have a desire to make a lot of money, and honoring that desire without feeling guilty about it. I've had people definitely shame what I make or what I charge, and that's their own story, right? That's how they value themselves. I also have seen people charge an arm and a leg without the results to rest on, where I'm like, this is smoke and mirrors, right? All I can do is myself, work in my own integrity. I check in with myself, what prices I am charging. I look at how good I am. I look at how good of results I get. I look at my continuous education, my continuous improvement. I'm never reaching a done point, right? I'm always invested in my own education, my own learning. I'm a coach and I always have a coach. I think coaches are one of the most important things that you can have in your life. And I think some people think it's silly to have one or not necessary. But when I look at every single great person in the world, they have a coach.
Yeah.
Every single athlete you know of has a coach. Every single, like I was just listening to a podcast with Hugh Jackman, and he was talking about his life coach, and Hugh
I
Jackman's
love
kind of
that.
made
He's
it.
amazing. Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
made it at this point. He's in his 50s. He has an epic career. He has more money than he probably knows what to do with. And Hugh Jackman has a life coach. And I'm like, why do we think it's weird to have a coach or to have somebody? I always want to have the next person. And I know like the right coach always appears for me when I've finished my completion with one coach. And I want somebody who's going to challenge me, who's going to see where I'm telling myself stories. It was funny because I was listening to Hugh Jackman tell his story about The Greatest Showman, and he really was like having this mindset that it's not going to be that great. It might not be that successful. It might, like, he had all these things,
Wow.
and his life coach came in and she told him, "You are just afraid of all of it going well." Like, she called him on something. I can't remember exactly. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, you're right." And from that day, he turned it over, and he and the director were like, "This is going to be one of the highest grossing musicals of all time, one of the most successful musicals of all time, one of the most famous musicals of all time. And we are going to like rock this." And they kept that reality as they made the movie. And I just think that's the value of a life coach. That's the value of
Yeah.
a powerful coach who can call you on the stories you're telling yourself. And so I always have one. And that has been a very pivotal part of my business.
I love that. And also, when I met, something that you said that really ingrained from our conversations was, some of our conversations throughout the day were about what's happening with different markets and different industries and what are we seeing in future. We were having conversation, and you said so clearly and so confidently, everything that I'm creating is exactly aligned to what I know I'm meant to create. And so I don't worry about the rest. It was
Mm,
something along that effect, right? And that's something that I've lived within as well. With the things that have gone really well for me were things where I just trusted my instinct, where
mm,
I followed and showed up and I wasn't looking around. And I think many more of us are pioneering in ways that we don't recognize that we are. So when we look backwards or we look all around us, we get really caught up in a shuffle that has nothing to do with us.
mm.
Right? We compare, then we get pulled into these places, just like Hugh Jackman with his
Mhm.
like his completely unwarranted.
I
like,
know. You're like,
like
Hugh Jackman's still doubting himself.
if Hugh Jackman is dealing with imposter syndrome, then
Oh,
I'm living for it. I'm just going for it.
we're all human.
We're all human.
I was joking because I told my friend that the other day. I'm like, celebrities, they're just like us. You really, no matter who you like, everybody's here having a human experience.
Yeah.
Everybody has doubt. Everybody gets worried about imposter syndrome. Everybody's afraid that they're going to fail. But a good coach, somebody with your back, and especially somebody to stay accountable to, huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Trusting your instincts, right? Because what you create is what's right for you, is what's right for your business, is what's right for your lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
So those components, I just love going again back to your empowerment, going back to that trust, going back to that intuition. It's so
Mm.
beautiful. And it's been so beautiful to get to see that transform in your life, even in the short time that I've known you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's amazing. I just so love the way that you've used your love of words, love of romance and sensuality, the way that that embodied in your life. How do you show up for yourself in self-care now that you're in this place of really loving and trusting? Like, what does that look like for you?
Definite time in nature every day. I used to be grinding, editing photos, burning the midnight oil, and I got burned out really quickly. So non-negotiable walks in nature every day.
Hmm.
I usually do 3 times a day. I do it after every meal, and I like to get 10,000 steps a day. That is one of my ultimate modes of self-care. Having high standards. So
Mm,
we definitely teach people how to treat us. And I teach people how to treat me from the very beginning. And if it's not in alignment with how I want to be treated, then there's not a whole lot of access in my life. Right. So, like, one of those is kind of like honoring my time, and I will honor your time, mutual respect. I remember I went on a date a long time ago. It was like our fourth date, and he was helping me set up for a birthday party, and it started raining and everything went wrong that won't go wrong. And he just started yelling. And I was like, yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
not for me. Like, that was a quick way to end that relationship. So I know what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And I don't make any apologies about it. One of the things one of my coaches taught me is love often has a no, a don't, and a stop. And we think that love is nice. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm nice, that's loving, when sometimes the most loving thing you can be is like, don't do that. Stop doing that. No, that's not okay for me. And that's the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others. So I have really good boundaries. I do not overwork. And that is kind of an impossible thing in this culture, but I have really designed a life. Now, I'm saying this after I have put in a decade of really, really hard work. Now my business is more automated. I do have more time. The other way I self-care, I love to cook for myself. I love to cook really good food, because most of the things, like when I'm stressed, I DoorDash, and then it just causes like a cycle of more depression, because I am very food sensitive like you.
Mm-hmm.
So if I eat like fried food or just food, like I don't know where it's coming from,
People's emotions, people's energy,
all
ingredients you don't know about.
if I eat meat, I get it from a local farm. And I know this is sounding like some people might not be able to afford this. Like, Darcy, I can't afford grass-fed beef. It's really expensive. I totally get that. But what I think we can all still do, and this might sound super woo-woo, but like, I still pray over my food energetically. I still give gratitude for whatever the animal is I'm eating, because I do eat meat. I've been back and forth on that, but the way my blood works and the way my body works, I do perform better with protein from animals. So how can I consciously do that? How can I give gratitude? I think the best self-care thing I do is I try to be very conscious and aware and honor when like things are sad or hard. And then I do bougie things, like I rent really fancy hotels in Paris and a Michelin star restaurant. Like, I did
Love
back in my
it.
20s, everything was poor, $10 a night hostels, clutching your bag so that nobody would steal it. So now I'm like, I want a pretty room at the Ritz with a view of the Eiffel Tower and to eat, souffle. And I love giving myself really beautiful experiences. And I love giving people who I'm with, like my friends and my family, I love creating really beautiful experiences from them. Even if it's just the way I set food on a plate, to how I have flowers on my table, to the playlist that I'm playing. I'm all about the ambiance and the mood. And to me, that stuff matters. My parents, that doesn't matter. Like, there's like, oh, I'll just eat in front of the TV or whatever. But to me, those things matter. Beauty matters. I love it. So anything I can do to bring more beauty, romance, presence, experience into my life, I take the time to do it. And I never think that it's wasted time.
So good. So good. I love that you include self-care as boundaries. It's obvious, it's logical when you say it, but it's not something that I think, when I say, what do you do for self-care? When I ask these questions to people, most of the time it's like, I like to take baths, I like to do facials, things like that. But boundaries, and loving yourself, such a beautiful self-care. And I am 100% with you on the bougie hotels. Like, I am down. I love roughing it. I will go on adventures, sleep in the car on the drive along the way, pee on the side of the highway, all the things. But I also want,
Yeah,
I want
it
the bougie
makes it so
hotel.
much sweeter.
It
I
does.
keep out in my Outback all the time. If it's a single mattress, I can do it. But like, if
Yeah.
something, I was at the Plaza Hotel in New York for my first time, and I rented the penthouse because I was going to lead a shoot there, but I got a few extra days so that I could enjoy. And within 5 minutes of arriving, they carry in fresh macaroons and they straighten your this and they do this. And they handed me this handwritten note about, welcome to the Plaza, Miss Benincosa. Anything you need is yours. I'm like, Yes, please. Thank you. I love
More
all
of
of
this,
this. The
please.
bed was lush and comfy. The bathroom was like a bathroom I would probably never recreate. It was like mosaic marble tile. I mean, it was just a work of art. I was like, oh, I appreciate this so much. This is so fun. I'm just spoiled and gonna have to be at the plaza every time I go to New York.
Every time you have shared with us so much beauty. And I just, your story, I love how much texture there is to your journey and your story. It's such a beautiful example for everyone listening of how there's never a timing when it's too late in your life to start looking at your life differently, to
Yeah.
shift perspectives, to make changes, and also live outside the box. We've both lived lives very much outside the norm, outside the box, and still do, and have to ruffle against, the societal norms and that conditioning within ourselves. But it feels so good when you show up for yourself. It's so amazing. That is so, so wonderful to get to share space with you. It's always such a gift. And I'm just so grateful for you coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you. You are such a beautiful interviewer. It just flowed and you asked such deep, beautiful questions. These are the kinds of juicy things I love to talk about that sometimes I don't get the opportunity because when I go on podcasts, people are like, how do you grow your Instagram? And I know how. So I'll talk about it. I'm like, grow your Instagram. This is how you market. This is how your sales funnel works. And I'm so good at that stuff too. But I really am at the point in my life where depth
Mhm.
of character, depth of experience, depth of purpose, of living life and playing life full out, of playing it brave. And you were a person that I knew did that from the moment, like just from your energy of meeting you. I was like, this is a woman who really understands life. She's had a lot of life experience. She's had to go through a lot of things to learn to trust her intuition and her gifts and her power. And I just tend to gravitate toward women like that because every time we get together can be such a rich shared experience.
Oh my gosh, that is just so juicy. And I feel the same way. What is a relationship, a friendship, any experience if it's not in richness and in depth, right? To me, I just don't have the tolerance for it at all anymore. The second we met, I was just like, oh, I think we actually said hello right as everybody was gathering. And I'm like, but we weren't done like diving into the depths of the universe and conversation and talking about Paris and talking about our travels. So it's always so beautiful to share that. And I'm just so, so honored to get to know you and call you a friend. Thank you so much for sharing all of you and the depth of you on this show. I think the more that we share that with each other and on our podcast, I think people, I know I relate to that. I know I feel activated when I hear stories of others who have done things differently, and I can sense in them that activation. So I know everyone listening is going to get that from this conversation as well.
Thank you so much.
Oh, beautiful friend. Thank you.